The Mets wasted the best game of the season so far for Jeff McNeil. Is this a sign of more things to come? Can Jeff get his season on track? We'll be talking about that and more on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
To all you amazing Mets fans, you're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Well, the Finkelstein winning streak has finally been snapped. For those of you who've been listening to this show for a while, you might know that I have not seen a Mets loss in person this year. It goes back to spring training. The Mets won the game that my dad and I went to. Then I saw a Mets versus Marlins game with Sean Manaea on the mound. That was earlier this season where the Mets won that one. Then we went out to that series in D.C. where the Mets had a sweep. My dad caught a couple games in Chicago and the Mets were playing at Wrigley. They won those games. So it was just nothing but Finkelstein this year when the Mets played and we were there. Fortunately, that all ends. I guess maybe my dad was more the rabbit's foot than I was, as it was just a frustrating game to watch in person tonight. I will say that the Mets sort of felt like they were in a little bit of a malaise, right? It was similar to me to the game where the Mets came out the London series and they faced the Marlins and they lost the first game of that series before they ultimately came back and won it, where they just didn't quite look right, although just some things weren't going their way. That's what happened in this one. First inning, Francisco Lindor draws a leadoff walk, steals second base, picks up right where he left off from the first half. And Brandon Nimmo nearly gets a base hit to drive him in, but Otto Lopez makes a diving stop, the second baseman. That keeps Lindor at third. JD Martinez draws a walk, and in my head, I couldn't help but think that Pete Alonso going to hit into a double play ball. And sure enough, broken bat double play. He did not get out of the box very well either, which is understandable when you get blown up and your bat gets shattered. But I feel like you got to be booking it out of the box with a runner on third base that could have scored. Regardless, it's not all on Alonso that the Mets lost the game just because of that one run, but it's just one of many examples where I felt like the Mets just didn't have the luck on their side. Second inning, same thing as far as base running is concerned. Mark Vientos hits one to the left center gap, and I felt like he sort of took it for granted that he was going to get to second base, sort of slowed a little bit as he was rounding first, and that cost him as he got gunned down at second. Brian De La Cruz made a great play on the ball, cutting it off, making a strong throw to second. But had Vientos gotten in there and it was a bang-bang play, Jose Iglesias later that inning rips a line drive just right at the shortstop. Maybe if the shortstop's holding on the runner, that gets through and Vientos scores. So it's just little moments where the Mets could have scored some extra runs in this game. Regardless, though, the guy that's at fault for them losing is Sean Manaea, because it was just not a good start from Manaea. Bottom of the second, gets the first out on a fly out, then gives up a double, pair of singles, sacrifice fly. It's 2-0 Marlins. I still wasn't concerned. I really wasn't. But then the bottom of the third happened, and I started to worry. So he gave up a leadoff single to Jazz Chisholm, who stole second. Jake Berger ends up ripping a double to drive in Jazz. Then Berger scores on a base hit from Josh Bell, and it's 4-0 Marlins. With that said, Jeff McNeil nearly got the Mets back in the game. He hits a solo homer in the fifth inning. And the funny thing about that was I was actually with a listener at the time, also named Ryan. So shout out to you, Ryan, and your wife, Melissa. It was great meeting you guys. And we were talking about Jeff McNeil. We were talking about how McNeil had thrown a little bit of a temper tantrum earlier in the game, took his helmet off when it was a 3-1 count, thought it was ball four, starts walking down towards first, calls a strike on him, and he couldn't believe it. And, McNeil had his typical sort of fit on the field, and then he ends up popping out in that first at bat. So we were going over that. It was just funny as we were talking about McNeil, and all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute. Is that a home run? You hear the crowd cheer. You look, who hit that? Is that Jeff McNeil rounding second base? So I missed the first home run from McNeil. Also, I want to give a shout out to Zach, another listener to the show that I met up even before that. Zach and I didn't have as good as luck, when we were talking, as 2 runs came across. It was in the bottom of the second where we met up. But regardless, I'm always so humbled to meet the listeners of this show at these games. to hear you guys tell your stories of how I'm part of your daily routine. And Zach was talking about how a lot of his family listens, his dad, his uncle, so many people. It's just awesome. It really is. And, when I have a listener ask me to take a picture with them, all that stuff, it still doesn't even compute to me. And I'm a shy guy in person also. So if I am awkward, Zach, Ryan, those that met me tonight, I apologize. I can't help it. I'm introverted. So it's always just cool though to feel that support from the listeners in person. So I really wanted to give the two of you guys a big shout out on the show today. Getting back to the game though. So McNeil hits the home run and the Mets score another run in the inning as Harrison Bader grounds out, but Francisco Lindor, Brendan Nimmo, the each draw walks on Edward Cabrera, who started to just lose it, which is what you were hoping for. But Skip Schumacher knows how to manage, huh? He got him out of there. There was runners at second and third. He did give up a sacrifice fly. Pete Alonso walked, but he got him out of there in time. Francisco Alvarez had to face an arm out of the bullpen. He flew out to end the threat, but still, Mets got a couple there in the fifth. Sean and I, though, you want to hold down the opposition when your team scores a couple runs, and he didn't do that. First batter he faced was Jake Berger with a solo home run, 5-2 Marlins. Sixth inning, the Mets crept very close. Jose Iglesias with a double. Jeff McNeil, a 2-home run game, makes it 5-4 Mets. And the funny thing was, I was texting Ryan, who I met at the game, throughout, and I predicted that the final score was going to be 6-5. So I said that the bullpen was going to melt down because I think at the time it was maybe 4-0 or maybe it was 4-2. I think it was 4-2 when I made that game score prediction. I thought that the bullpen would give up a run late. Then it was the Berger home run. I'm like, all right, well, there's the 5. When McNeil hit that home run and it became 5-4, I think both of us believed that my prediction was going to come true. We were holding on to that. It just never happened. Top of the 8th inning, Mark Vientos lined out. Jose Iglesias walked. Jeff McNeil, infield single, hit a comebacker to the pitcher that he couldn't field, was able to get on. There was a wild pitch that put runners at second and third with one out. And at that very moment, I thought for sure the Mets are going to win the game. But Harrison Bader could not get that tying run to come across. Tanner Scott comes on for the 4-out save. And that was pretty much it for the Mets. Every team in baseball can win at any given time. And if you're playing the Marlins and you end up in a position where it's Tanner Scott on the mound for them and the Marlins have a lead, you failed. Because Tanner Scott, for the most part, is going to get the job done. So the goal for the Mets throughout the rest of the series is don't let that happen again. That means you got to score on the starting pitcher, and the Mets didn't do enough of that in this game. I'm not necessarily blaming anyone. It was just, like I said, there were some opportunities that just didn't go the Mets' way. But you have to take advantage of the Marlins rotation, which is just awful right now. So you got to score runs early. You got to score runs on the bullpen before you get to the few arms that they trust. And that's what they had here. They were able to pitch their best relievers in this game. It was tight, and they were able to hold on to it. I'm not going to be concerned about this series just yet. 3 more games in Miami. The Mets are a better team. Go out, handle business, and prove that this is just like that hangover coming off the London series, right? You can go out, you win the next 3 games. Who cares about dropping the first one? It was frustrating, of course, and Sean Manaea has to be better. But you move on to the next day, and hopefully the Mets can get things right back on track. We'll see, though. We will see, and part of it is going to be Jeff McNeil. So I want to talk about him in just a minute here because Jeff McNeil had such a great game. Do we have faith in Jeff McNeil as a starting player for the Mets for the rest of this season? I'm going to go through that in just a minute. First, though, a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time, the fastest and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. And I got to tell you a little story about Game Time. Today, as I showed up to the ballpark in Miami, I pulled into my spot in the garage. It was 6:57 for a 7:10 start. I did not have tickets to the game. Pulled open the Game Time app. I was quick with it. I think I had tickets purchased in 30 seconds. I walked all the way to the stadium, got in. I was in my seat for $25 all in behind home plate, and it was 7:05. So I was able to catch first pitch. It's crazy how the timing worked out. I definitely play with fire with Miami traffic. I would not recommend that. But if you do, if you end up late, Game Time is there for you. They're the place to go for last minute tickets. as late as an hour after the event starts. You can still get your tickets at game time. You can see the view of the seats before you arrive. You see all-in pricing up front, so there's no hidden fees you have to worry about. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. If you're an everyday listener of the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service. You get updates from me anytime some news breaks on the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You also get the starting lineup sent to your phone in a graphic every day, so you never have to go on social media to see who is starting for the New York Mets. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Jeff McNeil has been the most polarizing player on the team outside of maybe Pete Alonso this year. It has just been a rough season for Jeff. But this was a good game. Robs a home run, makes another great catch in the outfield, hits a couple of home runs. Was this just a flash in the pan? Maybe, but there are some encouraging signs. Jeff McNeil has gotten on base in his last 7 starts. He is hitting .350 over those last 7 games. In July, altogether, he's hitting .262, .322 with a .548 slug. Had the 2 home run game tonight. Had another home run earlier this month as well. So not horrible. You look at his OPS this month, rocking a 870? Not bad. Now, granted, small sample size, but Jeff McNeil is one of the most interesting players in the New York Mets right now because they need him. They need him. And look, I talked about it on Wednesday's show, I believe, where I went through the top 10 candidates that I could find in the outfield. There's just not a lot of trade candidates on the market that are available and that make sense for the Mets. Yeah, you could talk about Jesse Winker. Here's the problem with Jesse Winker. Can't play defense for the Mets. Just can't. Doesn't have a fit. Also, you need someone that can hit left-handed pitching. Can Jesse Winker hit left-handed pitching? No, he can't. So you keep going through the different list of names. You have Michael Conforto I talked about. Is Michael Conforto a better player than Jeff McNeil? Probably. But what does it take to get him? Are the Giants even selling? I don't think they are. I just don't see that as a likely road. Mark Canha, is he having a better season than Jeff McNeil? Maybe, but not much. He's not playing well right now. And you think Mark Canha is going to fare well playing right field? He's not. Tommy Pham has been struggling lately. Kevin Pillar has been struggling lately. The more you go through different candidates and different names, there's not an ideal fit. Those were all former Mets. Look at the in-division trades I talked about. Jazz Chisholm, we saw him tonight. Sure, it makes a little bit of sense, but are the Mets going to give up the prospect package that the Marlins are going to expect for one of their best trade chips? Probably not. And I honestly see Jazz Chisholm and Tanner Scott being combined so that the Marlins can extract really good value in one trade. And I don't see the Mets being the team to pull off that deal. Lane Thomas, another option. Is he going to be the answer for the Mets? Doesn't hit right-handed pitching at all. Has been terrible in right field this year. So you really look at the options. There are not a lot of good ones. We talked about some blockbuster possibilities with Luis Robert, Brent Rooker, Randy Arozarena, and each of them had their flaws. So I say all of this to get back to Jeff McNeil because Jose Iglesias has all but won the starting second base job. Gets the start tonight to open up the second half against a righty. Tyrone Taylor has played fairly well against right-handed pitching, but it was Jeff McNeil that they put in the lineup in right field. I think that says something. Here's the thing about Jeff McNeil, and I tweeted this after he made the catch on the home run robbery. His defense gives him value to this club regardless. It does. You might not agree with me, but I'm telling you, having a guy that can play above average defense in right field and at second base is a huge asset to any ball club. Now, if he's going to hit with an OPS that's in the 500s, yeah, not that much of an asset because he's detracting so much offensively. But this is a guy that won a batting title. This is someone who has been a very good hitter for a long time. And he's not at the point of his career age-wise where you think that alone is the end-all be-all why he has been struggling. So I look at Jeff McNeil, and there's just something about the law of averages. For a guy that has been this bad, maybe he's due to be good to meet somewhere in the middle. Because we saw that last year. We saw Jeff McNeil struggle and then figure it out. Now, that was on a team that had nothing to play for. So if you want to say all the pressure and expectations were gone, that's why he hit. Okay, you can certainly make that argument. But when I look at the market, look what else is out there. I just don't see the ideal fit that makes clear sense that the Mets can go out and get that is a better player that will provide more than Jeff McNeil when you also, again, take into account the fact that you have to give something to get them. I don't see the overwhelming upgrade is what I'm getting at. So if the platoon in right field is Jeff McNeil and Tyrone Taylor, where McNeil is starting most days, but maybe every once in a while against a tougher righty, Tyrone Taylor's at right and McNeil's at second base, however it ends up working out, that still could be the best way the Mets can get through the rest of this season and compete. Honestly, I can't completely sell my stock in Jeff McNeil. And I know that makes me crazy. And I talked about this a couple weeks ago where I thought Jeff McNeil was turning a corner when he hit that home run against the Astros. So I guess every time Jeff McNeil homers, I'm like, come on here and say, is this the turnaround? And then he'll inevitably go on another slump and make me look bad. But I am not selling the stock. I am still buying into the idea that Jeff McNeil can be a good player for the Mets down the stretch here, and it changes the entire complexion of their team when he is hitting. Because now that bottom half of the lineup looks that much better, and you can plug him into so many different places and give you what should be an above-average offensive option. It's been far below average this season, but I'm not necessarily accepting that as the rule of thumb moving forward. There is that law of averages. Maybe Jeff McNeil ends the season with an OPS over 700, which would mean a lot more positive progression from this point on. The OPS is now at 622. For his career, he has a 780 OPS. He's a career 290 hitter. This year it's 223. Career 352 on base. This year it's 282. If he meets the middle on all of those numbers, so if he raises his average by the end of the season, he's hitting over 260. If he gets his on-base percentage and he gets it over 330, gets the OPS and finds himself over 700, that would be a great second half for Jeff McNeil. And it might just be one of those things that helps propel the Mets into a playoff spot when it's all said and done. So great game out of the break for McNeil. Let's see if he can build on it. Bad game from Pete Alonso, though. I want to talk about Pete, the pressure that's on him, but also a prospect in the minor leagues that could make Pete Alonso even more expendable beyond this season. We'll talk about Pete and Ryan Clifford in just a minute. First, though, a word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On Mets is brought to you by Booking.com, Booking.yeah. With summer travel heating up, especially travel for baseball games, it's time to explore those U.S. cities you've always secretly wanted to learn more about. Yes, we are talking about your rival cities. With hotels, bed and breakfasts, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com, you might just find your perfect stay, even in your baseball rival city. There's only a couple months left of the baseball season, and even in a loss today, I got to tell you, it is so much fun to watch these games in person. You don't realize what you're missing until you're at the ballpark, and it's a great way to travel, see the country, go to a city you've never been before, catch the Mets for a series, eat some great food. It's a lot of fun. And remember, use Booking.com for your stay. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your rivals. So book today on Booking.com on the site or on the Booking.com app. If you want to stay up to date on everything in the world of sports, make sure you check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. Pete Alonso came up empty a couple different times in the game today, and he has just not been good at all over the last couple of weeks. This is a problem for the Mets because without Pete Alonso, they're not going anywhere this year. As great as Lindor and Nimmo have been, lately, JD Martinez and Pete Alonso have not been carrying their end of the bargain. And what made this lineup so special was getting contributions from all four, especially when at least one of those two power guys is going. It just gives you so much more of a threat. So when Francisco Lindor draws a walk and ends up on second base because he steals a bag, you get him in. You don't miss that opportunity. You put that run on the board in the first inning. The Mets have to be better in those spots. And Pete Alonso, he's got to get back to the guy he was in 2022. Because that year, it felt like every time Pete Alonso came up with a runner on third base, less than 2 outs, he was at least going to get a sacrifice fly, at least. And a lot of times he shortened up and got a base hit and extended the rally. But we haven't seen that guy this year, and the pressure's on. I don't think that Pete Alonso is going to get traded. But the Mets have to decide if they're going to invest in him. If the right course of action moving forward is to have Pete Alonso in the fold for a long time, and that's what I want ultimately. I've made the argument for it, but you do have to realize what is coming. And right now, if you look at the Mets farm system when it comes to position players, the guy that is coming is Ryan Clifford. He has been ridiculously good lately. In the month of July, he's hitting 400 with a 471 on base, 733 slug. He has 6 doubles, 3 home runs. In June, he had an OPS over 1,000. In 50 games in AA, he's hitting 240, 380 on base, 557 slug. That right there is a 937 OPS. It's really good numbers. The at-bats are always in control. He has great discipline in the box, and he has ridiculous power. Where does Ryan Clifford play? Well, they're trying to keep him in right field, but he's getting a lot of time at first base. If you look at the Mets and their future, Mark Vientos could be the first baseman moving forward. You have Ryan Clifford. He could be the first baseman moving forward. If he's not, where is he going to play in the outfield? You have Nimmo, you have Marte next year, which obviously isn't a big deal. You have Jet Williams, you have Drew Gilbert, both on their way up. They've been out this year due to injuries, but Gilbert is back. Hopefully Williams gets back at some point in September, but regardless, next year, they should both be healthy, ready to go. You have Luis Acuna, who could be pushed into the outfield. You have Jeff McNeil, who could be pushed into the outfield if Jet Williams or Acuna is playing second. You still have Tyrone Taylor beyond this season. Not that he's going to stop you from doing anything or pursuing anyone, but you look at all the different players the Mets got to fit into the puzzle. Ronnie Mauricio and Brett Beatty also. Do you need to spend $20+ million on Pete Alonso? Especially if you have a prospect in Ryan Clifford that might just win the hitter of the year in this system, who could be your first baseman some point into 2025. It's just another layer into the big equation of Pete Alonso and his looming free agency. And we don't know what's going to happen. We won't know what's going to happen until we get there. But if you think that Ryan Clifford does not weigh into the Mets decision once you do get to that point, you're not giving him enough credit, because I think this is a guy that really could be a big part of the New York Mets as soon as next season. So it's great to see him swinging it well. And Pete Alonso's got to step it up. You want to be a Met forever. You love the city. You love the fans. We all appreciate that for sure. And he has been nothing but the model citizen, teammate, everything. He has done all you can ask for across his stint with the New York Mets up to this point, his career with the New York Mets. But a right-handed first baseman who probably shouldn't even play that position at the end of his next contract, because if he signs a long-term one, how much value do you place on that? And when there's other options at that position, you can much easier talk yourself out of giving him $200 million, even if it is with heavy deferrals, regardless, giving him that level of commitment. It becomes so much easier to say, you know what? Let's let Pete walk. Let's get our comp pick, and let's move forward with Mark Vientos on opening day with Brett Beatty at third, knowing that Clifford could be up and you can slide Vientos back to third if Beatty doesn't hit. There are so many options that the farm system could present to the Mets over the next couple of years. Now, Pete Alonso could just be the DH, and it would maybe solve a lot of things where maybe that doesn't matter. But I just thought it was interesting to talk about Clifford because he has been hitting so well, and sort of attach that to Alonso, because the rational side of my brain, not the emotional fan one, thinks that David Stern is going to look at whatever Pete's going to command in free agency and just decide that's not worth investing in. And that's going to be his recommendation to Steve Cohen. And I think Steve Cohen trusts his baseball people. So we'll see exactly how that all shakes out. But I just thought it was worth mentioning, considering some of the missed opportunities and what Ryan Clifford has done to talk about that on today's show. I appreciate all of you who tuned in today. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. I'll be back breaking down Saturday's game on tomorrow's show. If you want to follow me on X, you can do so. Finkelstein Ryan. You can follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen, your first watch every day. And after your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports with our local experts from each team and our league-wide experts from each league. You find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.